Sage Wonder here, and welcome to Coffee Talk. So, run for your life. There's giant birds. The birds are going to carry you away. They're after your children. Run for your life. We're being attacked by giant birds. That's right. Today we're talking about Thunderbirds on Coffee Talk. So if you haven't heard about Thunderbirds, here's the basic thing. It's more than a rock band. It's more than a car. It's a legend. A American legend. The southwestern United States, according to the native population, was once home to giant mythical birds. Now, these birds were seen as more than just animals. Quetzalcoatl, I think I'm saying that right, was actually considered a god, a flying dragon god bird animal thing that could talk. This legend, this mythology, is so widespread and pervasive that it's actually a part of nearly every North American Native American tribe. That they all have stories of coexisting with enormous birds. Birds with 25 to 40 foot wingspans. Now, according to experts in prehistory, that during prehistoric dinosaur days, there were giant, enormous, feathered birds, not unlike giant eagles or condors. These were birds of prey, with reportedly from a 25-foot to a 40-foot wingspan. Now, I really find this one of the more difficult crypto stories to believe for a couple reasons. One is, where are they hiding these birds? Bigfoot can hide because he's camouflaged. You can hide behind a tree. You can hide a 12-foot ape in the Pacific Northwest mountains. I've been up there. You could hide a Sherman tank. But birds fly. They're not camouflaged in the sky. A bird in the sky you can see. However, I will offer you this little quick insight that my sister used to have a piece of property way out in the middle of nowhere, and she had a swimming pool. And I would lay on my back and float in the swimming pool up into a clear, empty blue sky. Until one day, I kind of caught movement up in the sky. And I was like, what is that? What is that tiny little dot way up there? So I went and got some binoculars. And sure enough, I could make out that these were bald eagles flying way, way up. I mean, they just... If I didn't have 2010 vision at the time, I would not have been able to see them. And I watched them a lot. They were up there almost every day, flying what had to be in the stratosphere. So small to just be a tiny, undetectable speck to a person with eagle-eye vision. Didn't always have to wear these readers. But, and I still have 20/20 vision at 20 feet. But it's just up close. I can't see. Aging. But, the older people in my family couldn't see those birds, but the kids could. So, is it possible that these giant birds are flying so high up that they're being mistaken for ordinary birds? You think they're closer to the ground than they are, so you think they're normal size, but really maybe they're in the stratosphere and they're way bigger than you think. But the other thing is, what do these birds eat? I mean... Scientists say that these prehistoric birds were capable of swallowing a jackrabbit whole and capable of feasting on and killing white-tailed deer and other, antelope and other animals like that. I mean, that's a big bird. What are you going to feed a bird like that? How are they going to get food? Where are they hiding? In the mid-1970s, 1975 through 1978, there were a ton of sightings in Texas, and Illinois, and Oklahoma of these enormous birds. Some of these are up-close in personal encounters with these birds. One theory that I've looked at that I think is plausible, that if you subscribe to the hollow earth theory, if you don't know about that, check out the hollow earth theory, that the earth core is not molten magma, but rather is hollowed out with an artificial sun or an internal sun that heats it, and even internal oceans that have tides. And there's reported to be animals there that were once extinct, like mammoths. Are the giant birds living in the hollow earth and we only see them because only sometimes they wander out through an opening and find their way into our world. That's honestly the best reasoning I can have behind it. Or you think we'd see more of these things eating cows and stuff like that if they were out there? They'd be eating your baby calves and your goats and stuff. I mean, like hawks eating your chickens, right? One would assume that. So they have to be from the hollow earth, or they're not real, one or the other. But here's why I believe in Thunderbirds. It isn't because of the mythology. It isn't because of the scientific background. It isn't because of the eyewitnesses I've seen tell their story in videos. I believe in Thunderbirds because of one person. Now, you might have heard me talk about this person. He's the guy that got me the camera job. He and I were really close friends. Honestly, still are. He's one of the people where if I was in big trouble, I could call him and I know he would move heaven and earth to help me. Even though he and I probably haven't talked in forever. That when I went through my first divorce, which was, it was just, well, if you've been through divorce, it's awful. It's hard. He was the only friend that stuck with me. He was the only friend that was there for me unconditionally. And I gotta say, I've known this guy for many, many years, and I've heard him tell a lot of stories, and I've never heard him embellish a story. I've never heard him add to it. I've never heard him be dramatic. He's always pretty much just tells a story like it happened. And I believe everything that this man says, and I've never caught him lying to me or anyone else. I mean, he didn't even lie to his wife. That's everybody lies to their wife, right? No, he shouldn't, but it happens. But this guy, I mean, honest, straight shooter, really straight shooter. Honestly, I won't be friends with people unless they are, because I am, and I can't tolerate liars. So this guy who I really, really trust, I mean, if this is my big endorsement of him, I trust him. He told me a story, and it goes like this. Now, he and I were swapping stories. We were bonding, and we were telling each other stories, and I told him my conversation with Bigfoot story. And then he does this, like he's afraid anybody's going to hear him, and I mean, it's kind of funny that he did that, because we were in a car driving down the road. But he told me this story. Now, he was a young boy, and he grew up in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. And he, like all boys in the mid-70s, used to leave in the summertime, leave home in the morning and not come home till night. That all of us boys and people my age, you might have had this same experience. We would go out in the morning and just stay gone all day doing whatever, doing kid stuff. For me, I had some country upbringing, but I moved around a lot, if you know my story. So a lot of my running around all day was building bike ramps and jumping them, and we did some outdoor stuff. And when I lived in mountain towns, we were in the woods a lot more. But it wasn't uncommon for you to grab your fishing pole and a hatchet and a knife and some rope and a tarp and go to the woods. And sometimes when you got a little older, you could just stay up there for a couple days, as long as you came home in a couple days and your parents knew where you were at. It was a different world. We had a lot more freedom. There was a lot less things to be scared of back then. So they would do this. And, not unlike Stand By Me, and that's a great movie, or Radio Flyer, you would show up from home, all the kids would, and you'd bring something. You'd bring a tote sack with some stuff, maybe a knife and some rope, or some food you could share, a canteen, a lighter that you stole from your parents. Somebody might have a cigarette, or maybe they might have copped a bottle of booze or something, and everybody could have a taste. And it was just, Playboys, whatever. It was boy stuff, and you would bring all this stuff. And sometimes I was told, and this never was the case with me, firearms were very much more controlled around the old Marine, and I didn't get to use them until I got to be a teenager, apart from home. I mean, apart from, him being there. But it wasn't uncommon back in the day for one of the kids to show up with a .22 rifle, just, do some plinking or some hunting or to kill a squirrel or something, just in case, you needed it. So this was the case with my friend. He would run wild in the Ozark Mountains in these groups of boys. So I guess he was about 12 or 13. when they were all out on a day in the woods, running around, fishing, catching frogs, crawdads, that kind of thing. And one of the boys had a rifle. And they'd just been swimming, and now they were fishing in kind of a swamp bayou backwater from a river in Arkansas. And one boy was right at the edge casting a fishing pole, and the rest of them, I guess there was about 5 boys in this story. The other 4 boys were laid back, kind of chilling. When they all noticed at the same time 3 extremely large birds that flew right into the little cove of water and perched in the top of one of these really big, ancient, old-growth oak trees that were everywhere. And it freaked them all out because they could tell right away that these birds were not like any other birds they'd ever seen before. For one thing, they were raptors, so they were like eagles or hawks or condors, but they were completely jet black, like a crow. They were black from head to toe. The only thing that wasn't black was the talons on their huge claw feet. And so the story goes like this. They were looking at them, and they didn't know what to think of them, and they were examining them. And one of them jumped up from the tree and circled the little impoundment, and the one boy who was fishing was still standing on the water's edge. When this thing head up, then turned down and nosedived right at this boy, just like you've seen hawks do to a rat in a field. Just like if you've ever seen a red-tailed hawk come down on a mole or a rat or a squirrel. That's how they do. They fly around like this, then they arch their wings up like that and hover for a minute, and then they just nosedive. And this giant bird that he said once it was down on the, close to them, he could tell how big it was, and he said it had a 25-foot wingspan. He said this bird was so big that if it stood on the ground, it would have looked him in the eye or been taller than him. So he estimated it to be about 6 foot from head to toe with a 25-foot wingspan. That's as long as your average motorhome. That's an enormous bird. That's a mythical animal of huge proportions. An animal that is supposed to have been extinct for a very long time. Well, this bird nosed up, nosedived down, comes down, talons out, wings spread, drops down on this boy and grabs him on each shoulder, one claw on each shoulder. My buddy said that the thumb claw of the talons went into this boy's shoulder just below the collarbone and punctured his skin, and it had him right by the muscles of the upper back, right where the shoulder is. And the other was clawed around right in here and went right in, so he had him by this muscle right here. And he began to pick up this 12-year-old boy who probably weighed about 115 pounds. And this bird grabbed this boy, and the boy didn't have time to respond. Like, he was in awe. Like, it was almost a deer in the headlights, is the way my friend described it. That the boy was frozen in terror. They all were. They didn't know what to do until that bird had a hold of that boy, and they was trying to carry him off. So that boy who was 12 or 13 had a 10 or 11-year-old little brother who ran up and grabbed that other boy, his brother, around the waist, which prevented the bird from being able to lift the boy completely off the ground. That he did pick him up before the brother grabbed his big brother around the waist. That bird did have him off the ground about 2 feet. That he was whoop, 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 trying to hoist this boy off the ground and carry him away. Of course, that whole thing spooked the other 2 birds, and they were up circling. And the boys were terrified that these 3 birds were just going to eat them all. That they were going to be carried away by these giant predator birds. Whew. He had my attention on this story, let me tell you. So the little brother runs up, grabs his big brother around the waist, prevents the bird from hauling him off. And another boy who had, it's funny because I believe, if I remember right, he said he had a golf club. Like I said, you would bring whatever out there, but he had a golf club, and he went to hitting this bird on its legs, its ankles, right where the feathers stopped and the feet start, he starts beating this bird across the thigh, essentially, with this 9-iron. I'm telling you, you can't make this stuff up. And the other boys tried to grab him around the legs, and they're all screaming at the birds, and one of the other boys is throwing rocks at him. And finally, the boy who had brought the .22 rifle decides to take action, and he empties the clip into this bird. Do, 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 do. 8 shots of .22. Do, 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 do. Just right into the bird's body. Well, that was enough. For, I guess it got through the feathers and got a piece of meat on this giant bird, and it forced them to let the boy go, and the bird flew off without its prey, and the 3 birds flew away. Now, this boy was pretty badly injured. That they ended up taking him to the hospital, and he had to have stitches, and there was a huge puncture wounds in the back, 1 in the back and 2 up front, on both shoulders. And yeah, not to mention he was freaked out, terrified. My friend said he was almost in shock. He was in shock. They got him back home, got him to his mother, but along the way they made a decision that no one would believe their story, that they would all be seen as liars, that they would all be seen as crazy, and they decided right then and there that this was a secret they were going to take to their grave. And that this boy, his injuries were because he fell down a hill and crashed into a dead tree that was down. That was the best thing they could do to explain his wounds. And quite frankly, his mother was concerned enough for the boy's safety and his health that she didn't even question their story and rushed him to the hospital for treatment. And my friend claims that he kept this story and he never told anyone, that the boys did a blood oath, that they swore never to share the story with anyone except each other. And they also swore to never talk about it again, and he says they never did. And that he claimed that I was the first person he'd ever told the story to. What do you think about Thunderbirds? Do they exist? If they do, what do they eat and where do they sleep? Are they circling continuously around the stratosphere? Do they only come down at night? I don't know. Where would you hide a 40-foot wide bird? All right, till next time on Coffee Talk.